Welcome, learners! For today's video, I'll be your facilitator, Miss Alagad Mayan, Bachelor of Secondary Education English 2 from Negros Oriental State University, Shatan Campus. For today's video, we're going to discuss the learner-centered teaching, description, definition, and characteristics, as well as differentiate learner-teacher approach, teacher-centered approach, and learner-centered approach. Learner-centered teaching is an approach that places the learner at the center of the learning. This means that the learner or student is responsible for learning, while the tutor or the facilitator or teacher is responsible for facilitating the learning. Learner-centered teaching focuses attention on what the student is learning, how the student is learning, the condition under which the student is learning, whether the student is retaining and applying the learning, and how current learning positions the student for future learning. It aims to develop a learner who is able to invent and to create, to think powerfully, to act effectively on what she or he thinks, to feel deeply and to contribute to the community, to the social order, and to lives of others in some meaningful way. It is very significant as a learner to centered teaching because it will widen our knowledge and to deeply understand the things in the surrounding. Learner-centered teaching includes explicit skill instruction. Learner-centered teachers teach students how to think, solve problems, evaluate evidence, analyze arguments, generate hypotheses. All those learning skills essential to mastering material in the discipline. Learner-centered teaching helps you pave the road to the learner's success. This idea of the teacher as the facilitator means that the focus of teaching shifts from the teacher to the student. This type of teaching should put learners' interests first. Teaching a learner-centered approach is important for adult teaching environment for many reasons. One is that it helps to develop learners who can learn and work on their own. This means that it enables lifelong learning and independent problem solving. Another reason is it is important by putting responsibility for learning in hands of learners. We encourage them to be active and responsible participants in their own learning. Also, learning-centered teaching is seen as good practice intentionally. We have tended to assume that learning was an automatic, inevitable outcome of good teaching, and we focus on the development of our teaching skills. I'll be showing you a diagram, learner-centered instruction. It contains learner knowledge and experiences are validated. Content of instruction is relevant to the learner's needs and interests. Learners make choices about course content and activities. Then, classroom interactions and tasks represent how language is used in the real world. Learners' first language and culture are viewed as a learner resource. Classroom tasks challenge learners and promote higher orders thinking skills. And lastly, learners gain skills applicable inside and outside the classroom. As a learner, it is very important to know the centered instruction because it will serve as a guide and better development of learning process. So we have table here. As you can see, teacher-centered instructional model and learner-centered instructional model. Under teacher-centered instructional model, first we have places the instructor at the center of the learning process, same as learner-centered instructional model. Second, in teacher-centered instructional model, instructor imparts knowledge not knowing or involving learners in the learning process. Learner-centered instructional model, instructor serves as the facilitator, involving learners in the learning process. Third is instructor chooses topics and activities. Learners participate passively. In learner-centered instructional model, learners influence topics and activities and participate actively. Fourth is assessments are one-dimensional and focus on grading. In learning or learner-centered instructional model, assessments are multidimensional and provide ongoing feedback. Then we have prioritizes memorization and correctness in teacher-centered instructional model, while in learner-centered instructional model, prioritizes higher level thinking. In teacher-centered instructional model, academic culture is competitive and individualistic. In learner-centered instructional model, academic culture is collaborative and supportive. So based on the table, we can clearly differentiate between teacher-centered instructional model and learner-centered instructional model. After instructional model, here is a quick comparison of what learner-centered teaching might include versus a more traditional teacher-centered approach. So in learner-centered approach, the focus is on both the learners and the teacher. While the teacher-centered approach, the focus is on the teacher who is the expert. Learner-centered approach focus is on how the learners will use the skills or content, while teacher-centered approach, the focus is on what the teacher knows about the skills or content. Teacher models learners interact with teachers and each other. Teacher talks, learners listen. Learners work in pairs, groups, or alone depending on the task. While in teacher-centered approach, learners work alone. Learner-centered approach, learners work without constant monitoring and correction. Tutor provides feedback or correction as questions come up. While in teacher-centered approach, teacher monitors and corrects. Learner-centered approach, learners have some choice of topics. While in teacher-centered approach, teachers chooses topics. Learners evaluate their own learning, tutor also evaluates. While in teacher-centered approach, teacher evaluates students' learning. Learning environment may not be a classroom, is often noisy and busy. Teacher-centered approach is learning environment, usually a classroom, is quiet. So as we can see in the table, we can clearly tell the difference between learner-centered approach and teacher-centered approach based on their positions, responsibility, and task. I'd like to propose 5 characteristics of teaching that make it learner-centered. First characteristics is learner-centered teaching engages students in the hard, messy work of learning. I believe teachers are doing too many learning tasks for students. We ask the questions, we call on students, we add detail to their answers. We offer the examples, we organize the content, we do the preview and the review. On any given day, in most classes, teachers are working much harder than students. I'm not suggesting we never to do this task, but I don't think students develop sophisticated learning skills without the chance to practice, and in most classrooms, the teachers gets for more practice than the students. Second is learner-centered teaching includes explicit skill instruction. So learner-centered teachings teach students how to think, solve problems, evaluate evidence, and analyze arguments, generate hypotheses. All those learning skills essential to mastering materials in the discipline. They do not assume that students pick up these skills on their own automatically. The third one is learner-centered teaching reflects or encourages students to reflect on what they are learning and how they are learning it. Learner-centered teachers talk about learning. In casual conversations, they ask students what they are learning. In class, they may talk about their own learning, and they share ideas and opinions. Next is learner-centered teaching motivates students by giving them some control over learning process. I believe that teachers make too many of the decisions about learning for students. Teacher decides what students should learn, how they learn it, the pace at which they learn, the conditions under which they learn, and the teacher determine whether students have learned. Last but not the least, learner-centered teaching encourages collaboration. It sees classrooms, online or face to face, as communities of learners. Learner centered teachers recognize and research consistently confirms that students can learn from and with each other. Of course, we can learn from each other, share ideas, share thoughts, and we can learn to others. Certainly, the teacher has the expertise and an obligation to share it, but teacher can learn for students as well. Yes, that is true. If work to develop structures that promotes shared commitments to learning. They see learning individually and collectively as the most important goal of any educational experiences. Of course, learning, if you want to learn, we need to listen, we need to collaborate to others in order to widen our knowledge and have additional knowledge.